Hello, YouTubers. Joe Kersey here on Sunday, March 9th, 2014, at around 2:10 in the afternoon, Eastern Daylight Time. Today, if my dad were alive, would be his 104th birthday, March 9th, 1910. God bless you, Dad. Now, this being a Sunday, I went to church. And I went to early service. I went to the 8 o'clock service. And, I awakened at 5 and got my acting gear and got tidied up and everything. And I wanted to go by Walmart and buy some food for the People in Need program. And so I got myself out of here around 10 till 7 and went up and bought sort of the requisite amount of soup for this food drive, and then went to the post office and mailed a check to the cell phone people, and off to church I went. And by the grace of God, got there safely. And it's first Sunday in Lent, Temptation of Christ. And Charles did a great job. I mean, he preached in, the style in which he's best, at which he's best. He doesn't think so, but it is his best way. He likes the pulpit set piece things, but I'm going to tell you this: when he just sort of stands down there and talks off maybe a note card, he is much better. And he actually continued the theme of Ash Wednesday as far as empathy, promoting. I don't like to use the word community, but I'll quote him. Community and relationships. Empathy that promotes community and relationships, as essentially establishing the church, large C church, as opposed to administrative small C church, in the way that Christ intended. And that, of course, implies certainly that to be a member of such a community, you have repented of your ways as much as a human being can on their own, and then ask for forgiveness and is forgiven for the rest by the sacrifice of Jesus Christ. And so he did a good job. So, all right. I turns out I was going to miss some good tunes at 10:30, but I didn't want to hang around that long. I didn't. Sometimes I've gone to both services, but I had things I wanted to get done here. Well, turns out I didn't get them done, but after the service, we do a Lenten sort of Christian formation, adult Christian formation program each year. And this year, see, I've told you we have a fellow that brings art in periodically and hangs it in the nave. And the theme of this Lenten exhibit is the Last Supper. or this do in remembrance of me, I think is the formal title of the exhibition. And it's it's the same thing. It's artists from say about 1880 on that this guy has in his collection that have depicted the Last Supper. And while there are obviously a few of them that mimic sort of the standard, well, not the Da Vinci, straight across, long table of 12 viewed head on. I mean, some of them, many of them depict the 12 disciples and Jesus sitting around a table, but there are others that focus on different, maybe focus in on a certain element meaning either the wine or the bread or Christ's relationship to that, and then maybe to another disciple. And they're all done in various, different styles, of course, because these are all very different artists, many different backgrounds. So, with that as sort of the point of departure for this Lenten discussion, Charles was going to he and the other two clergy, well, maybe three. I mean, maybe Emmanuel. Maybe let's see, you have Charles and Karen and Roseanne and Emmanuel. And Charles may come. Charles is going to go on vacation with these kids and his wife down to Florida for a week here next week. I guess it's their spring break or something. I don't know. And anyway, but we've got tons of people to fill in. We're very fortunate in that sense. And so you're going to have, today we were going to discuss, the sort of the standard, definition of the Eucharist, which I much prefer to call Holy Communion. And then the next 4 weeks we'll go through the different versions in the 4 Gospels, and then in one of these, I think next week we'll also cover what St. Paul has to say about it in 1 Corinthians. So and then Charles is off to Florida, but he should be back in time, following week or week thereafter. And see, I came from a very austere Protestant background. I only experienced what they called the Lord's Supper. I think maybe one time it was called Holy Communion. Possibly 3 times growing up, from the age of 5 to the age of 13, maybe 3 times. And bear in mind, I was going to church pretty much every week at that stage of the game. And the 3 times that it happened, I can't say I was all that impressed. First of all, hadn't had any sort of formal instruction of what this all meant. The town I grew up in we had some Roman Catholics in it. We got a Roman Catholic elementary school. But there was still that residual hangover that, against, just, bells and smells and mumbo jumbo and, it's just like, if there's a lot of uninformed stuff flowing around, then, you can't help but be swept along with it somewhat. And although it's interesting, the only really intelligent discussions I had about religion growing up were with my Roman Catholic buds there in high school. And what got them talking? What got them talking about this stuff with Prots or Protestants? Well, they didn't call us. My son calls me a Prot, but the Protestants was, these guys did not like Vatican II. They did not like Vatican II. It really, really pissed them off. And so they were more than willing to discuss then the shortcomings of the new regime with a Prot. Because they realized that I was kind of hardcore in, a way that they were hardcore, only just on the opposite side of the fence. So we had these great discussions. And, but in any case, the idea the idea about this communion was always very, sort of suspect to me. Now I understand, I understood about, Jesus did this and instituted this, and I knew, but the emphasis where I grew up was always on preaching, always on the word, the preached word, the spoken word, the read word, the scriptural word. Jesus was the Word incarnate. And so the idea that you had to go through this, particularly when it was so horribly done in the Protestant setting, these little individual glasses of not even wine, but and then these little discs of cardboard. It just all, and then, of course, then, the whole doctrine of transubstantiation was always a huge, and still is, and will remain. I'm pretty much settled my mind on that a long time ago, and I rethink it from time to time, but it just becomes a firmer thing. This transubstantiation stuff is something I don't go along with. Stronger language not to follow, but it's happening in my head. Sorry, Thomas, Aquinas, and my son. But see, when the Episcopal Church in Lebanon opened, back in, let's see, this would have been 63 or 4. They didn't have a church building yet. They had one shortly thereafter, but originally they were meeting in a funeral home that let them use their just one of their viewing rooms, so they could have the church service. And that's fine. But I actually knew a guy that was went to this church, and he says, "Oh, we drink wine." Something like this. It's like some sort of exotica, and so my initial experiences with Eucharist, Holy Communion, the Lord's Supper were all sort of off the wall things. Either off the wall in terms of culturally, off the wall in terms of intellectually, off the wall in terms of how it was actually done. Passing little trays of these these little great, give me a break. So then, of course, once I was a boy, now I'm a man. Now I thought like a boy, now I think like a man. First, I saw through a glass dimly or darkly. And now I see fully face to face. Well, no, we don't see that. That actually refers to the end of time when you see God face to face. Uh, but like so many things in Scripture, you can draw analogies to all sorts of things in human life and daily life. Well, maybe the sweep of a human life, an entire sweep. Um, okay. So the topic for today's service discussion was, the Eucharist. Well, so he ran us through the catechism. He ran us through the catechism of the U.S. Episcopal Church Book of Common Prayer, 1979. Now, it was written I think, around 1973, and it was sent up for trial in 1976, and it was accepted in 1979. And it's, there's nothing really controversial in it. It talks about the sacraments and there being 2 sacraments: Holy Baptism and Holy Communion. But it also does sort of, like a lot of things in the U.S. Episcopal Church, it weasels a bit. It says other sacramental rites, and then it talks about other things like confirmation, ordination, matrimony, reconciliation, unction. It allows that the tradition of the church might have allowed those to become sacraments, but actually that makes this prayer book sound a lot more hardcore than what it is nowadays. Now, we may as well just be a Roman Catholic church for all intents and purposes. Sorry, guys, that's not. My son's a Roman Catholic, and I love him to death. So, I mean, it's just the standard. It's the standard stuff. There's nothing controversial there. But interestingly, we didn't get into the discussion of the definition in the 39 Articles, which actually, was the foundational document, one of the foundational documents of the Church of England, which, from which we are, in theory, descended, and again, none of the stuff in the Catechism differs very much from the official, Article 28 of the 39 Articles, but we did get a bit into the transubstantiation issue. Now, our rector, was a Roman Catholic growing up. He grew up as a Roman Catholic, and then for whatever reason he shifted, and he says even still today, even when he does it for us, when he consecrates the bread and wine, he, the epiclesis, and invokes the Holy Ghost to come down upon the bread and wine. He still has this little, that he's actually changing the thing into the, not quite actually changing substance, but he says I'm at the point where it's more like, instead of transubstantiation, it's trans essence, and not transcendence, although there's that part of it too, but trans essence, transessentiation, I guess would be the best word. And he says that's very much like happens in the Eastern Orthodox Church, and as I understand, that's the case. You have, at that point in the service, you are supposed to have so closely approached to divine space, that then when you partake of the bread and wine, and they put the bread into the wine, and they give it to you on a little spoon. As I read, I don't know. I mean, maybe they don't, but that's what I've read in several books. It's all, you have the human and the divine interacting. I mean, intermingling. It's almost like you as a human being are going into solution with this sort of bread wine mixture. You're entering into the divine essence. Well, so you're entering into the divine energies, as I think the Orthodox would want to emphasize, that you're entering into the divine energies rather than the essence. But you're certainly having an encounter with the divine in a very profound way, and so we broached on that in our discussion. It was a good discussion, and he just sort of ran us through the standard elements of the service. The sursum corda and the preface and the offertory, and you have the anamnesis, and then you have the institution narrative, and then you have the epiclesis, the calling down of the Holy Ghost on the elements, and then the great Amen and the Lord's Prayer. Holding it up, whether you gaze at it, don't gaze at it, that sort of thing. So we covered a certain territory on that, and it's very interesting. I said to him, I didn't say him, I said the whole group. It was interesting to notice how our bishop, that he did the service at a funeral for this deceased priest. He held the bread and the wine up, but he didn't look at it. Now, whereas Charles always looks up at it. And he says, I do that because I want to get everybody to look up at it. And I said, I noticed that Bishop Bridenthal just looked straight out. And I've always been intrigued to see, particularly if we're doing it where we're all standing around the communion rail, which we sometimes do if you only have like 20 or 25 people to service. We're down there, before we go, we haven't, it's not like we walk up the communion rail after all the stuff. It's like we're there while it happens. And sometimes we even stand around, in the chancel area and do this. It's always interesting to see the ones that look up as opposed to the ones that sort of stare. That's not right. Stare is not the right word. Gaze straight ahead. I've never quite been able to figure out if there's any theological correlation between, the gazers up and the straight aheaders. I'm philosophically a straight aheader, but I can't help but sometimes look up. Oh gosh. So okay. All right. So that was good. The other good thing that came out of this, and there were a number of good things that came out, the one that really struck me, the thing I hadn't thought of before, said he arrogantly, is the idea that not only is this an encounter with the divine in a physical and mystical sense, of an encounter, at this point in time, it's also an encounter with the divine throughout all of time. It's as if, it's interesting. Charles says, when I put on that stole, just to do the service, says, I'm 2,000 years old. Oh, he says, he's standing in as a proxy for Christ. And he says, and that basically reflects the fact that Christ is present. When two or three are together, when two or three are gathered together, I will be with you. Christ is there, and it's since you're having an encounter with the divine, you're having an encounter with eternity. Eternity is the simultaneous presence of all time. You are having an encounter with every believer in time, as well as and throughout all time, and in the future, who accept the fact that Jesus Christ is the Son of God, was resurrected from the dead, and is going to come again. And at some point, all of this nonsense, like we hear about every day in the news, is going to stop. Things will continue in a great new way, but all of the really hateful, let's rebel against God nonsense and destroy His creation nonsense will stop. Yeah. Well, let's see. I think that covers it. Yeah, I was going to show you all my books. I showed you this. Here's the 1662 Book of Common Prayer, by Cambridge University Press. This is Church of England prayer book. This is the one I use for my own personal stuff. Daily stuff I do, I use this. It's got the Coverdale Psalms in it. This is the what's called the 1928 U.S. Prayer Book, and from what you see, I not growing up in the U.S. Episcopal Church, I didn't know much about this, but to listen to the older folks when I first started going in 1995, you would have thought a meteor had hit and taken away this prayer book. Well, once I got a copy of it, $60, by the way. It's essentially pretty much the same thing as this one. I mean, they're textually pretty much the same. The U.S. Prayer Book, the 1928 American Prayer Book, and then the 1662 Book of Common Prayer. It's very interesting if you go through and you read through the various Eucharistic prayers in all of these. Now the new U.S. Prayer Book has 4 official prayers, and then then you've got four official Rite 2 prayers, then you've got 2 Rite 1 prayers, and then they've got some other service books now out that have some additional Eucharistic prayers. But the Church of England still has not repudiated, fortunately, Well, I don't know. I don't have a dog in that fight, do I guess. Uh, the 1662 prayer book. And they almost did in 1928. Almost did. And some churches still use that. And actually, they used that prayer book for this crazy Looney Tune Princess Diana's funeral. They used the 1928 prayer book for her funeral. I think they may have used it for the Prince William and that Middleton woman's wedding here a while back. Then here's one actually I do recommend. I recommend all the prayer books heartily, but this one is the Book of Common Prayer, the text of 1549, 1559, and 1662, and it's edited by Brian Cummings, and it's by Oxford University Press, and it was put out in 2011, and this is great. It's too bad they don't have the 1552, because there was a prayer book of 1552 in the middle of that, which was a bit more hardcore than the 1559 prayer book, but this is well worth getting, and for anybody who's really truly interested in the various permutations and how this has progressed or progressed or deprogressed, depending on your attitude toward it. It's very worthwhile getting that one, and I bought this from Christian Book Distributors up in it's out of Peabody, Massachusetts, and they have a website, and they give tremendously good service. So I think that's about it. So it's great when you can, as my dad said, if we took a lot of magazines, and I, at one point I said, gosh, this has got to cost a lot of money, taking all these magazines. He said, yeah, but if you take away just one idea a day, I like this. I haven't thought about this in a while. One idea a day from a magazine or a book or something, says, that you haven't thought of before. Says it's worth what you've paid for it. I think that's, gosh, that's true. And it turns out, I think unwittingly and somewhat unconsciously, I've lived that way. So already now, bye-bye, YouTubers.